Well, some stats that are certainly worth reminding ourselves of: 33 people lost their lives, over a billion animals killed, including some from endangered species. And we're still to actually coordinate and chronicle which species have been completely decimated. More than 18 million hectares of land in southern and eastern Australia, which, to give people an idea, that is an area greater than the 2009 Black Saturday fires and the 1983 Ash Wednesday fires combined. Nearly 6,000 buildings destroyed, including 3,000 homes. So again, we have to personalise that figure, to think about every home, there's a family, one dweller up to a number of dwellers. So that's had a significant effect. And once again, the ABC was not only the story gatherer and dispenser, Michael, but also the ABC was critical in providing information to those on-the-ground communities who found themselves in the fire's path. Can you speak to that a bit, about that role of the ABC?
Yeah, the radio, well, let's talk about the radio presenters. It was one thing being on TV and being part of that coverage, which was quite expansive, and lots of people relied on that for sure. But I think the really important people were the local radio broadcasters, also those working at ABC Sydney, ABC Melbourne, putting out programs that went out statewide. Radio shows at those times of crisis usually normally become a bit of a town square, Corrie, where people relay information. They certainly relay their stories. They might say that a certain neighbourhood's looking dicey, don't go there. The radio presenter relays that. At the same time, the radio presenter has information coming into him from ABC journalists, from the fire authorities, which he or she is trying to relay to the residents. So it's those radio presenters who are really, really important in the mix of things. And given that they are local, usually if they were in the local areas, were local residents as well, it had special meaning for them and created special worry for them if they were broadcasting at a time when a fire was approaching on their property. There's one chapter in the book written by Richard Glover, who presents the Drive show on ABC Sydney. He's Raph Epstein's equivalent up in Sydney, also a veteran journalist like Raph. Richard, like every ABC presenter at that time, was called in off holidays, did hours upon hours upon hours of radio presenting, which was fine until he realised, and he wrote in his chapter, that all of a sudden a fire front was approaching what he describes as his humble mud shack at a place called Wombian in the New South Wales bush. And all of a sudden, I mean, that concentrated his mind. His main focus, of course, was on the broader fire front and getting that broader information out. But he was getting very worried on air as that, looking at reports, the fire front was fast approaching his house. His house survived, a bit of damage around the roof, but otherwise it was fine. But that's an example of the selflessness of some of the radio presenters involved in that really big team effort.
Michael, how did it unfold those months, but particularly that critical time when it seemed like all of Southern Australia was on fire? How did that unfold for you? And were you able to, or indeed did you desire to leave the presenter's desk and go out on the field? Because, you know, regardless of desks and trimmings and morning programs and all of that, the journo heart beats true. You just want to be following literally the fire engine, I suppose. But
Yeah.
but how did you kind of work out how you personally were going to tackle this?
In my case, there were two assignments. One was that assignment in November when things got really hairy on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. The decisions really work out themselves. It was clearly very serious. We try with News Breakfast to be on the ground when big stories are happening. So it was pretty much a no-brainer that I was set up there to cover that, and I was up there for a week, maybe a bit more. The second assignment, which was the South Coast fire coverage around that New Year's Eve period, I was on holidays in Sydney, and I, like so many other ABC journalists, just rang in and said, I'm here, not necessarily to present or co-present breakfast from the field, but just to go and report from a fire, because in this circumstance, and it's the same at The Age, at Channel 9, at 7, the Herald Sun, every media outfit. Resources are stretched, so I just offered my helping hand. So I cut my holiday short, and I was driving down before I knew it on New Year's Eve in 2019, before we clicked into 2020, through really smoky, windy Sydney, and spent the next week and a half or so in various places on the south coast. And, obviously, given my day job, very quickly presenting breakfast as well as doing network stories and just general news gathering. So it pretty much works out itself. And I think most journalists, if they're really serious about it, in that circumstance, in that time of crisis, will do what I did and do what so many others did and just put their hand up and be part of the team.
Well, you're talking to someone who was the national arts writer at the Australian at the time. And I think I was due to write a feature on the Australian Ballet. And all of a sudden I was in amongst the fires for a couple of weeks. That's just what you do, isn't it?
Well, you're a journo at heart with your recovering arts or bushfires. So it's
Well, that's true. That's exactly true. And you just want to be where the story is and help if you can. And one of the things that really struck me about that experience of mine back in 2009, Michael, and it is so evident in the stories that your colleagues have collected here, is the willingness, I mean, I can't think of a better word at this stage, of so many victims to talk. And so it is very hard as a journalist, I think sometimes if you're an ethical one, you know that people are often talking for reasons they're in shock. Sometimes they do want their story to be chronicled. They do feel empowered to some extent telling the facts or describing what they've been through. But sometimes also as the journalist, you've got a bit of there's a balancing act, isn't there, between taking advantage of your situation and perhaps even holding those victims up to some sort of further trauma if you go further with them?
That is such a great question, Corrie, and you would have been in a similar circumstance covering the fires when you were there. It is such a tightrope to walk. You'll see people in, say, evacuation centres, as I did, openly weeping. They'd either lost their house or were fearful of losing their house, or at worst case, a loved one. Others just walk around with this dazed look on their face. They clearly are looking pretty rugged, been up for God knows how long, either trying to save their house or just battling to get out of the front of the fire. I tend to approach them without the cameras rolling. I'll go up and have a chat. Excuse me, I'm Michael Rowland. I'm with the ABC. We're here just gathering information about people's stories. Would you mind having a chat? And if they say no, absolutely, that's it. I move on. And if they're willing to talk, I'll talk to them for, often up to, depending on how hard it is to get them to speak, and respecting their trauma, up to 15, 30 minutes before the cameras start rolling if they agree to an interview, just to get their stories, just to make them feel comfortable with me. And then if they're completely okay with it and comfortable, we'll get the cameras rolling. It's a very fine line to walk. And I've also been in situations where I'm viewed as part of the dreadful, vulture-like media, piss off, leave, go, and you've got to respect those sentiments as well. And other colleagues have taken different approaches. Journalists have, some journalists, no names, no pack rules in the past, not necessarily in Black Summer, but other crises have adopted the foot in the door approach and bustled in, which has given us all a collective bad name and really don't serve their purposes in the long run. You've just got to always got to be sensitive. I saw a lot of emotion. I saw a lot of grief. I saw a lot of tears. And it's hard not to be affected personally as a journalist in that sense.
Despite all of this important and good work our taxpayer-funded national broadcaster provides, federal governments continue to cut budgets or at least maintain status quo budgets despite CPI, wages increases, other expense increases and so on. And earlier today, I had a chat with a dear friend of yours and mine, Reynold McDonald, who, apart from being a former ABC announcer and a former managing director of The Age, and he is a member of the Friends of the ABC, a bit of a mover and shaker under the radar, I think Reynold is, but I asked him about this and he said the ABC has moved into a position where it is unable to fulfil its charter to provide that range of services it is expected to provide. And he stressed it wasn't the people or the talent, it's the funding to do it. And he says, how can the ABC continue to produce such remarkable coverage with bleak and tough funding allocations? And I agree with him in that. You know, to me, it's a lack of foresight and a lack of commitment, actually, to the national good. So how much can you talk to that, Michael?
I wonder who's watching. Thank you, Reynold, by the way. And I acknowledge Reynold has a storied career and really was a valued member of the ABC when he was presenting on ABC Melbourne all those years ago, and does some great work advocating on our behalf and Friends of the ABC. It's hard. It is hard. For instance, it costs, I haven't got the exact figure, but at least $3 million to cover Black Summer. That's people like me, it's the radio presenters, it's transmission tower costs, it's
all the overtime.
Yeah, exactly, all of that, a lot of that. $3 million to cover Black Summer. There's no specific allocation for emergency broadcasting funds. That came out of the ABC's, in this case, news budget and local radio budget. Money that would otherwise fund the day-to-day running of newsrooms, the day-to-day running of the local radio programs. So we're stretched, and I know my boss, ABC's managing director, David Anderson, has made this point to Senate Estimates Committees and in various speeches. The ABC really does need extra support, if only, as we're talking about Black Summer, if only to ensure there's enough money to provide a service critical to the government's constituents if they happen to be Liberal or National Party seats in these areas. So we can provide that information if, God forbid, there's another Black Summer or a devastating cyclone, say up in Queensland, that we have to cover. We need to get the information across. So funding's always an issue. We had a budget cut by $84 million in 2018 from memory. It is a budget cut, despite the word games and the semantics government ministers continue to play. It is a budget cut, and we have to deal with it. And we just hope there aren't too many more Black Summers in the next few years, because that is really, and if there's no budget increase, or at least pause in the indexation that amounts to a budget cut, that is really going to stretch the organisation in the years ahead.
We have a question, Michael, who says, hi, I'm a young third-year journalism student, so please excuse my ignorance. I'm just wondering, when you are asked to drop everything at the office or wherever you are to attend a scene, what is the first thing you do as a journalist? E.g., do you talk to experts, or do you film the scene, or do you speak to witnesses straight away? Really good question.
First thing, I pack my toiletries bag. Getting down to the tin takes. No, we grab what we can, and speed is of the essence in these sort of stories. So you hit the ground as quickly as possible, as I did from Sydney, where I was holidaying and driving down to the south coast of New South Wales. I wasn't driving in this sense. On that journey, my camera operator Fletch was driving, and I was making calls from the front seats to the fire service, to local community groups, evacuation centres. Often evacuation centres were at, say, the local footy club or the local surf club. So you'd call those places, you'd call charities. I mean, you just, as a journalist, and this is a great bit of advice for the journalism student, never feel stupid, never feel dumb about ringing and asking, no matter how dumb a question or how stupid a question or how insignificant a question you think it is. Always do it, because it's that question, it's that phone call that might get you the information you need to help your journalism, to get you to where you need to be to cover the story. So your mind's running at a million miles an hour. You're making all these calls. You're listening to ABC radio or having the ABC News channel on iView on your phone, watching firsthand what the deal is. Trying to get as much facts and figures and information in your head before you actually go on air yourself. So it's a case where you can't really waste a second.
Another question, Michael, which we sort of touched on before, but I do want to read it out. It says, what threat does the continuing discourse advocating the defunding of the ABC, in brackets, most of which has been generated by conservative media? That's not my commentary, that's the question. But what threat does this pose to future coverage of worsening climate disasters?
I have no idea what that conservative outlet could be, Corrie. I wonder who, or outlets. Listen, first and foremost, the ABC is going to cover the bushfires of the future, the cyclones of the future, the climate change debates of the present. There is no question we are going to cover it. We are going to make it work. If there's, God forbid, another set of fires somewhere this coming summer, we will throw everything at us in terms of people, money, other resources. So that just goes without saying. The challenge is, by doing that, and say we lose another $3 million covering the next huge disaster, that's collectively now, after Black Summer, $6 million less money we have for the day-to-day running of the ABC. And that might, impact, say, more extensive coverage of the climate change debates, investigative pieces along those lines, analysis pieces. So there are consequences down the track if you're talking about a pool of money that doesn't move, or in fact is decreasing care of those budget cuts. But I mean, there is never going to be a time that the ABC won't throw everything at the climate change disasters that will inevitably, we do know, because the scientists tell us it will happen in the future. When they do happen in the future, we'll be there covering them. We've just got to work out how we, deal with the money hole going forward.